All right, we're all set. It's pretty good. We tried kind of convenient that we had the technology outage because we are waiting on several other people that I do know are coming. So a couple more didn't come in and everyone's seated, so that's actually kind of good. Extra bonus there. Don't worry about that. It's just a mouse that fell. So yeah, without further ado, we'll get right into this topic. This topic was introduced by Mandy. It was her idea to kind of raise this topic. This topic is 100% her idea. Unfortunately, I couldn't get her to agree to present it herself. So I went through, did the research, put it all together, and yeah, it's really interesting. This idea that you know, obviously it's up there. You don't need to repeat the title, but this idea that there's almost like this seductive quality to intelligence. Sometimes, like learning how things work, knowing how things work, accumulating knowledge can have somewhat of an addictive quality. And then the pursuit of knowledge can become almost autonomic, kind of a habitual thing, a deep habitual kind of addiction, if you will, to consistently going out and trying to acquire more information all the time, more and more. And I think that's called information overload. There's a colloquial term for it. That can have some dire consequences, right? We can have too much information sometimes about things, and that doesn't seem practical. But when we add in this layer of misinformation, aka the internet, we have this nice little kind of Venn diagram or a convergence of information saturation and misinformation saturation kind of meeting without the human capability to apply the critical thinking to all that data. It's not possible. It's too much data. And so with that comes this like long-term despair is literally the best word for it. This primarily comes in the form of, if you look around American culture, Americans tend to be some of the most creative people. In Hollywood, we have all this stuff. We're definitely our country has a huge net output of creative arts, right, around the whole world. Our brands are recognized around the whole world, especially, but our creativity as well. Our movies are world-renowned. People watch the Avengers over the whole world, right? It's not just, the Avengers aren't just in the United States. Avengers are watched everywhere, right? So like in Bangladesh, they're watching the Avengers, and in Australia, and in Singapore, and in Vietnam, they're watching the Avengers. What the heck? So the United States has this really big creative intelligence pool that cranks out tons of information. We crank out a ton of Nobel Peace Prize winners. And we just so happen to also be an extremely lonely nation. They're starting to do, we might do a meetup on this or not, I don't know, but they're starting to do some really innovative research on loneliness and its actual health consequences, and they're starting to think that might be one of the highest things on the list as far as health consequences goes. So Americans have a tendency to be very lonely in general. That doesn't mean Corey or Bill or anyone in here is, it's just in general our people of our society tend to be very isolated and very lonely, okay? And if you can imagine the human condition, that would naturally invoke despair. So you have a nation full of lots of intelligent people in the United States, despite what you might hear. There are a lot of intellectuals in the United States. There's a lot of intelligent people in this country. There's a lot of intelligent people all over this world. Where we can really get down to the nitty-gritty and study intelligence, like here in the United States, what I think we find out is that people that are in that category of kind of outliers of intelligence to the extreme, a lot of them tend to be mentally not as happy as they could or should be. And so we're going to break that kind of down, why and how that might be. Right, so I would say that probably the group in here tonight is probably slightly above the bell curve. I don't know where, but I'm sure collectively. And so I would look for some anecdotal evidence that supports some of this, or contrary. It's fine, when we get into the more of the group discussion part. So without further ado, we get into our joke. And here's a joke on intelligent design. And here's, I guess, God. And he's got a bunch of things that he's adding to the recipe of when he's cooking the earth right here. Right, this is like, I guess, creation. Mm-hmm. And so you have birds and insects and krill and medium-skinned people, light-skinned people, dark-skinned people, reptiles, amphibians, trees, and just for fun, he's going to, and it says, and to make it a little more interesting, he's sprinkling in some jerks. I just thought it was hilarious, so figured to include that one. Mm-hmm. Then the next one is our first joke / pseudo quote here, which is this guy, Dr. Zakir Naik, I guess you'd say that. The human eye is so complicated and complete that it can't have evolved. It must have been created by a perfect designer, by Allah, right? I think this is absolutely hilarious because he's wearing glasses, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't get kind of funnier than that, right? So, human eye is this perfect thing. It's created by God. It's perfect. There's no flaw. He's got glasses on to correct his vision. So this comes from a really old. This isn't a segue from last week's conversation, but we could make it that if we wanted to. But the idea here is that some components that we find in biology are so specialized and so sophisticated, it's hard to imagine like a predecessor to that particular thing. Like the eye seems like such a complete object, like he's saying here. And that's already been blown completely out of the water. There's all this very, very detailed evidence that shows how, like, even the most primitive form of an eye has an evolutionary advantage in how. Yeah, Michael, sure.
The concept is called irreducible complexity.
Yes.
That if it's any less complex than this, it won't work. So why would it evolve?
Right.
And the answer is simply one more phrase. It must have evolved for some other purpose. So that then once it had evolved not like an eye, just as a spot that absorbed visual energy more efficiently than some other spot, it had a different purpose. Mm-hmm. Once it had that purpose, other things might have happened. And irreducible complexity means, well, if I can't figure it out, it must have been God that did it.
Exactly.
God of the gaps.
Yeah, so kind of the new theory. I'm not really into drawing a lot of stuff on the board, but in this kind of eyeball, how would an eye, that's something so complex with a retina and a lens, and all these different cones and rods and all these things, iris and focal points and all these muscles that attach. How could something? You start off with basically a skin, a plane of skin or something like this, right? And if an organism develops a photosensitive cell on that skin, and there's a light source somewhere, there's a light source available, when that plane is facing in a direction where that light can fall on it, that's something that organism can now sense. It's facing the light source or not facing the light source. Well, it just so happens that has an evolutionary advantage to catching food. For example, if you're facing the light source and then something moves between the light source and your photosensitive cell, that there's an object there, and maybe now you can strike at it, right? So even a photosensitive cell could have an evolutionary advantage. Well, then obviously an array of photosensitive cells would have even more advantage, right? Then if you take the same thing and you have if you have a dimple, like a depression in that, and then inside that depression, inside that crater, if you will, is filled with dimpled cells, that gives you now much better directional access. If you're looking down in a tube, right, the tube has to be completely facing the sun, so you get it more precise. If you have a dimpled, you have more of a 3D kind of sense that you can now pull. So a dimpled shape in the surface is evolutionary favored, again. Now when you have epithelium, let's say a skin that grows over it, okay, that epithelium could then be contracted or constricted or warped or misshapen with muscles, right? The skin being able to move in that area could then distort that lens, that primitive lens, and that would then only get better and better. So there's all these really clever ways that you can come about just going from a photosensitive cell all the way up to a modern complex eye, and why that would be evolutionary favorable the whole way. So yeah, please.
Or a segmented, multi-directional eye without those characteristics like insects have.
Sure.
And the octopus has an eye, and it is certainly not a shared biological inheritance between us and the octopuses. Mm-hmm. They've had eyes since before we were mammals.
And maybe the only commonality between way back in the ancestry was just a photosensitive cell, right? And it took on these different evolutionary paths.
There's lots of photosensitive cells. Every cell is photosensitive to some extent or another. It's just selecting among the descendants the ones with more of it than another for some consequential reason. It's not planning.
Right. And so we can find out really creative ways to imagine how an eye could evolve in its modern complexities. We don't have to then say the only way an eye could exist would be if there's God. with some creativity and with some deep thought and some good intellectualism, we could find a way around this idea that it must be, only possibility is in God. Well, that's been pretty much, I think, handled pretty well. Next one is, there's this quote, scientific statistics class at MIT. A student says to the professor, how can this be possible? How is all this stuff, everything around us, possible in terms of statistics? I mean, what are the odds, right? We find ourselves alive at this time, living in this country, breathing the same air, like we're all in the same room together, like even right now, like you say. Living in this country, breathing this air exactly at this moment in history, in this room, and with everything around us occurring with the precise manner. What are the odds of that happening? Asking the professor. The professor comes back with 100%, which is very clever. It's a clever way around the question. And at the same time, it's 100% accurate as well. The odds must be 100% because, the fact that we're all here. So that's just something to throw out there. And so this is a good segue then into the meat of this discussion, because we can get caught, like anyone that has average or above average intelligence can get caught into these type of thought experiments, and not only get caught in them, but get trapped in them, right? I'm not going to sit here and say I'm hyper intelligent or anything like that, but I'm intelligent enough to where some things have affected me in this kind of way. For example, I had this math teacher that was talking about blinking. Okay, I hope this doesn't possess you all with this, but I had a math teacher talking about how many times you blink a minute, right? And says it's really difficult to count your blinks. You need a machine to do that for you, to accurately count your blinks over a period of time, because we blink autonomically. We blink without thinking about it, right? It says, but it's one of those special biological processes that you can still control. Just like your breathing, you can control your breathing rate. You can also control your blinking. You can make yourself blink. It's not just autonomic, right? And she said that basically what happens is a lot of times you blink and you don't realize it. And so what happened in my mind is I had to suddenly I realized every blink that every time I blinked, and I got caught like in this psychotic mode for like days, maybe even weeks.
Oh my God.
Right? Of like every time I blinked, I'd notice it, And so I was like, should I be counting my blinks and this kind of stuff? So I got like kind of obsessed with this idea about blinks. Yeah, please.
But at the same time, you have to understand logically that you notice a lot of times when you blink, but you can't tell if you didn't notice when you blinked.
Exactly, and that's I think the last one that I have about that unknown factor. Yeah, and so this particular math teacher that I had was a very intelligent person, and that's another idea about this intelligence, is that intelligence can be a dominant force. So like someone that's hyper intelligent, and I was a child at the time, so a juvenile mind, compared to an adult who's highly intelligent, is like that influence can be so strong of intelligence itself can be so strong, and if that intelligence is misguided, that can lead people down a path of despair very easily, right? I mean, you could think of like not just cult of personality, but you can think of intellectual ideas that people have gotten trapped into, paradigms that people get kind of proven in their mind, if you will. Certain paradigms, intelligent people will work out some math, and the math works. The next thing you know, they're very committed to something. They're really committed to a theorem or to a hypothesis that they really believe. And then it comes out later that they were completely wrong. That's can be really shattering and lead to really heavy despair. Well, if you just don't care about it at all, that's kind of a way around those kind of problems, right? You're not committed. A lot of people are afraid to get into politics because of that. Right? And they're like, well, everything I said on the internet is out there, or everything, and it's going to be used against me. They're scared because of this preponderance of information. Well, yeah, I mean, we just learned with this Kavanaugh thing that, sure, you can be held accountable for something that happened 30 years ago. And, maybe on an intellectual front.
Yeah.
Or not, yeah. But God forbid you were an atheist and trying to be successful politically, right? In the United States of America, good luck to you. How many atheists are in the Senate right now?
We don't know.
Probably close to 100%.
Yeah.
How many outspoken atheists are in the Senate?
Zero.
It's zero. So
There's probably a lot of fakers in the world.
You think?
Of course.
So we might naturally have some segue into last week's conversation tonight, and it's just because it's fresh in our minds. But anyway, so that's kind kind of a cool segue into this whole thing. So let's jump in. So the topic for tonight was, oh, please,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I'm kind of new to philosophy. I don't know what intelligent design is.
Well, please, Michael,
Um,
because you look right at
Intelligent
me.
design is the philosophical proposition that everything works too well, everything is too finely made out of small enough parts to vast. It couldn't have happened just by accident. It has to have been purposefully made that way. But the thing is that's so filled with logical flaws that, in fact, even if that was true, the intelligence of God is necessarily high enough that all he had to do was hit one hydrogen atom just so. And the billiard shot that he just did gives you the universe you have now, including everybody's political opinions and the colors of the flowers. I mean, it's, if you're assuming that intelligent design of a universe requires an omniscient and omnipotent being, well, now you're just second guessing him on technique. It's a stupid circular logic, and it should be ignored at every opportunity.
So the trap that's kind of out there, the intellectual trap that's used for people that are pushing a religion usually of this intelligent design concept would be like, if typically like go for a wristwatch would be like the classic, right? So say, hey, look at your wristwatch, okay? You know with 100% certainty, there's no doubt in your mind that that was made, that didn't just happen by random occurrence. That was actually created by a watchmaker, has created that. And there's zero doubt in your mind, and you know 100% that that's true, correct? Right? And so you get to agree. You start nodding your head, yes, I agree. And so then they say, well, what you're being led to believe by the science community is that something as extremely complex as the human body, with the human DNA, with all the chromosomes and all the DNA pairs, the entire sequence of human DNA, and then how all that DNA creates amino acids and proteins and creates this entire body from a single cell, sperm and egg thing. We're now being asked to believe that all that detailed complexity just happened by random chance, right? Well, that's kind of the reason that's a strong argument is that it's a straw man. Okay, because that is not what's being claimed. It's not really being claimed that a human being is like a watch, So the obvious thing is like looking at the mechanical creation of a watch versus the biological creation of a being, right, or of a living organism. So now we have an apples to orange right out of the bat. So we have a bit of a straw man there. Straw man is a philosophical thing. Is like, to attack an argument, you paraphrase someone's argument in an inappropriate way or in a way that they're not framing it, and then you attack that instead. Mm-hmm. So it's like creating a facsimile or a copy of what they're saying that's distorted, and then attacking that copy to undermine their core genuine point. So it's like you're misrepresenting their viewpoint and then attacking their misrepresented view, right? And that's exactly what's happening with this. But it's very strong because I can connect that in my mind real easily. I say, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, the watch does make sense. I look at this painting over here, and there's no way that this little painting not as complex as it is. I mean, this isn't a complex painting at all. But there's no way that like paint droplets fell on this canvas and made this. 100% know that this was not a random occurrence in the universe.
So you don't believe in Jackson Pollock?
So, I use that argument to then say, now look at the complexity of human being. Look at the complexity of life, right? There's no way that just by evolution, which we are now falsely saying is just chance. It's not. Evolution isn't a chance thing. Evolution follows a favor of survivability. The most, surviving, that which propagates their DNA the most is what passes on to the next generation. So there's a selective force in biological evolution that's very different from this. So we do have an apples to orange comparison. Yeah, please.
You were almost saying survival of the fittest, almost that, but that's not true. It's survival of the just barely fittest at that particular moment in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes in evolution, it's just the one that got through. You know, it's the one that made it.
Luckiest, you know.
It's the one that made it. You know.
Just be faster than the person behind
Or
you.
slower, just about.
But if you're just barely
Don't
finished,
live in the
you might
UK.
sprain your ankle.
Yeah.
So it is still a disadvantage.
And it could be like, you know, this group living over here is just by living there, the volcano went up over here. You know, there's random things that happen as well, but there is a survivability. There's that passes on as genes, then is favored in the evolutionary process. So that's a lot different than like creating a watch from gears and from, you know, bolts and springs, and it's a lot different than a physical arrangement. Yeah.
It's the procreation of the survivors.
Mhm.
That's what it is.
Mhm.
Yes.
And yeah, they reproduce themselves, and they're the survivors. So whatever it was that caused them to survive, if it can be reproduced, it will be.
Mm-hmm.
But only because
It's
they were
a
the
two-step
survivors.
process, yeah, they have to survive to
The guys,
procreate.
the guys at Chiluxa Club they may have had some sterling DNA, man. They might have had, maybe they were great mental powers, you know, just because they're dinosaurs. They might have, but, you know, they got hit with an asteroid.
Yeah.
And
So
they weren't that fit.
right. So the intelligent design kind of model, that's just one flavor of it. There's many derivatives of it that come up in kind of like a philosophical argument. Yeah. So there's this other bait and switch kind of thing, since we're talking about it, is that comes in really heavily with religion, especially people that are trying to create converts to the religion, okay? It's another straw man attack, which is kind of obvious once you see it, but it's not obvious right off the bat. Like, I'll walk you through it, right? I'll say, okay, so what's your name again? I'm sorry.
I'm Ben.
Ben?
Yeah.
Okay.
Me too.
Yeah, oh, you're the one with the boat?
Yeah.
I thought, okay,
yeah,
you're the boat, Ben. Okay, gotcha. Perfect. Now I'll always remember it. Yeah, so anyway, so it goes a little something like this. You know, in your lifetime, have you lied to somebody? Right? And you're going to say yes, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, and that makes you a what?
Someone who has told a lie.
Yeah, it makes you someone that's told a lie, but the kind of playbook here is that you're going to come back and say liar. Okay? So now what we've just done is we've said Ben liar. Okay?
Hey, but I played golf, but I'm not a golfer.
Right? So this is the straw man. So I'm getting you now to agree to something that's not really true. The preponderance of things, just assuming if you're normal, which I assume you are, for the most part, is that a majority of things that have come out of your mouth in your lifetime probably have not been lies, right? So to then characterize you as the proverbial liar, someone who lies very frequently and often, probably is not appropriate. But in my little straw man kind of game here, I can get you to say, I'm a liar, right? Which is what I'm trying to do, because I have to reduce your self-esteem, and that's another part of it. Next thing I'm going to say, have you ever stolen anything? And you probably say yes. You probably have, even directly or indirectly. You might have walked out of a store and not even realized you didn't pay for it, right? Something has probably happened. When I get you to agree, yes, I have stolen, I say that makes you a what? And then you come back with thief. I can assure you you're not genuinely characteristic as a liar or a thief, but here we are going down this path. And so then, you know, a few other things just like that. And so this is a typical straw man kind of argument, is I get you to agree to something that is completely asymmetrical to reality. And now we're locked into that. Now we're in agreement that Ben is a lying, thieving, you know what I mean? Have you ever had an imperf thought? So that makes you a sinner. You know, so here I am. I have all these qualifiers, all these negative qualifiers that we've now both established are associated with you. And now I'll tell you about how we can make that all better. Like how we can make you not a liar and a thief, you know? So it's this big, broad miscategorization of who you are as a character by doing that straw man attack. Same thing with this intelligent design idea, right? We start off with this watch kind of concept, mechanical parts, and I say, well, the human body is n degrees of complexity greater than that watch. Why wouldn't you then automatically, naturally understand there was a creator that created you? Right? You get it?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, so that's the, yeah, that was a lot.
I think there's another aspect to it. It has to do with the inability to imagine how an item as complex as a human body or an animal or whatever could come into existence with all of those specific features.
Right.
And the answer has to do with the amount of time. So if there was insufficient time and still such an entity appeared, then it would indeed be
Miraculous.
miraculous, yes,
Mhm.
perceived as that, yes.
Well, just because evolution poked around randomly and found the solution eventually doesn't mean that all evolution has to be slow. I mean, if you selectively breed things, you can get, I mean, like they went from wolves to dogs in just 6 generations.
That's not evolution.
So
it is a small piece of evolution.
Yeah, and so this is also like a standard sales technique, the straw man, and also like this staging. It's called a staging technique. Because what I'm doing is I'm using stagecraft to set up a false paradigm, which I'm then going to later draw conclusions off that then you are going to agree to, which is usually then me selling you something of some type, or slipping in something that otherwise would be very difficult to slip in, right? For example, Amway, when they did their typical sales pitch, you know, like Amway is like selling soaps and things, right, to your friends, pyramid type stuff. And the kind of approach there is they do the same thing, but with financial. They say, where are you today? Where do you want to be? And so this idea is like, you know, you want to be much better off financially than you are now. And so you kind of put that future goal of much more money as like B, right? And you are at point A right now. And so this is now how you're going to get you to point A to point B. So we create a false problem, okay? The false problem is you don't have as much money as you want to have, and so then we put a framework around it. We say you're at point A.
That's a
right
real
now.
problem.
You're at point A right now, and you want to get to point B, which is point A plus a whole lot more, right? Money. And now I'm going to sell you the solution on how to get there, which is of course Amway. Yeah. And so the same thing is true with the religion and with this God thing that I'm trying to sell you, right? So like now Ben's a liar and a thief, and you need to be saved and anointed, and you need to be made holy, and you need to be made cleansed of your sins, and all these type of things. So I've now had you agree to that you're in a lesser state, and now I'm going to sell you the solution on how to raise yourself back up, or you know, heal yourself, right? Because you're damaged, right? But the actual truth is though, that like the reality here is that overwhelming majority of your life, you've been an honest person. And so, but it's hard for me to then sell you a solution if I started from that premise. I have to start from a premise of reduction for you. I have to reduce you as a human being first to then sell you the cure.
But there's no shortage of problems. Why do we need to make up more?
Because it sells well. It's a sales technique.
Yeah, you're portraying religion as something that is diabolically foisted upon us by tricking us.
Yes,
Exactly.
I am. Yes, I am.
A lot of it is, not all religion.
And I would just like to state that I don't think that that's correct. I think that our religions are a product of who we are and our effort to accomplish a number of things. And that indeed the idea that we are, quote, sinful, arises from a fact, and that is that any of us who are born have within us tendencies to do things that are going to be a problem to our social group, to society. And so children are, quote, bad in that sense. And so then that becomes a part of the mythology of religion. Well, how did humans have that badness get in them? And well, it was because of, you know, whatever. But I think
Because someone ate an apple that a snake talked them into eating.
I think that the portrayal of religion as being a something that is a way of tricking us humans by some kind of predatory entity, whatever that is, whoever that is, that we're being tricked into religion. I don't think that that is an accurate and useful way of characterizing it. I think religions are that our religions come about because of who we are, and it's our effort to come together socially and to have an ethical and moral code and so on. But of course our religions are outdated at this point as far as beliefs about what exists and how the world works and so forth. And so that's a problem that religion is faced with today, that those existential beliefs are outmoded. But that's just that's no different than a child has to evolve to a more socially acceptable entity as an adult. And so we as a species are that way, and whatever we do is that way. All of our creations are evolving. So demonizing religion, I think, is not a good idea. I know I'm in a minority.
Well, just in a basic sense, when somebody has to frame something in an incorrect or an untruthful way to get you to buy, that is naturally a built-in deceptive technique. It is a genuinely known sales technique.
Unless the person believes it, who is saying that to you.
Well, it's not deception if you believe it when you're saying it.
Yeah, and so indeed this becomes a problem for many religious professionals, pastors and so forth, who come to feel that they are now beginning to advocate to people what they no longer believe. But that doesn't mean they started out not believing it and or just learning how to trick people to get their money or whatever way of demonizing religion.
Sure. So Carla and then Michael.
I'll pass.
No, please, no.
I believe, as you, Bill, that religions can indeed get started for the good of people, that people do believe in them. I look at all the religions around me now, and I can't point to any of them that doesn't have a temple and doesn't have some place where people come together and you agree to agree on a certain train of thought. To me, that's not spirituality, that is religion. And so therefore I won't be religious where I will have my own spirituality. And it's not directed. Most of the religions, I won't say all because I haven't seen them all, and I've backed away for a good many years of religions, but they're businesses. They're businesses, and they have an agenda, and they do tell the parishioners. The pastor does stand up there with a lot of emphasis in his words, or the woman, man or woman, standing up there and telling people what they need to do and follow this program. It's just like if a person came to you when you were working and had a problem, they would be paying you for your services. Well, you have to pay for these services. You can't just have a religion without belonging to a group and adhering to that and paying them in some way with either your time, your wallet, or both.
But see, I'm not in disagreement that happens if our religions are our effort to come together and study together. Where are they going to do it?
Where are the religions trying to come together?
That's in churches and synagogues.
No, religions aren't trying to come together.
No,
people are coming together for
yes,
that religion.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Coming together for community.
So it has to be that way. What, are they going to meet out on the street when it's raining?
Perfectly.
There's
No,
community groups.
It would work just as well
Community
from a
groups work just as
spiritual
well.
point of view,
I
with
don't-
a slight advantage to the fact that the rain would give us all a collective need that we might choose to ameliorate for our friends. That would be an exercise in spirituality
That
couldn't
is-
happen in a church.
That is the
I think
main
you're-
way that
Maybe we should
people
walk on hot
find
coals.
a relief.
I think you
Is
guys
doing
are
for
missing the
others.
point. You guys are missing the point
When
Doing
entirely.
for others.
I think you're both totally talking about something that isn't the point.
And I think it is.
Well, I think you're wrong.
Well, I think.
Can I finish saying why I think you're wrong?
Yeah, let's do that.
Thank
and
you.
We'll jump back
Yeah,
on
Chris is
intelligence.
presenting,
It's all right. No, let's go ahead. No,
Okay.
jump back on topic.
You have in the world people who have very strong spiritual beliefs in the need for humans to do good for each other. And you have in the world people who think that the wealth they have should be used to create more goods and services and wealth by themselves. That's called capitalism and not religion, okay? You can't look at what Bernie Madoff did and say that's what's wrong with capitalism. No, that's what's wrong with Bernie Madoff, not what's wrong with capitalism. And when you look at some huckster selling eternal life for $7.95 a month plus endow a chair here at the church. The problem isn't his faith, because he don't have none. The problem is people are willing to cut him slack because he's got a collar that doesn't open in the front. And if you got a collar that doesn't open up in the front, you're a godly, wonderful person, and we should all do what you say. It's not the problem that they have faith. The problem is the guy, people can use your faith to make you do things that aren't good for you and aren't good for anyone else. And people can make you use your money to do things that aren't good for you or aren't good for anybody else. And the problem with those things are not that there's religion and that there's capital. The problem is some people are scumbags. And until we are willing to face the fact that a scumbag with a collar that doesn't open in the front is still a scumbag, and a guy in a $2,000 suit is spending a lot of money on his clothes. He got that money somewhere, and his clothes don't make him better at doing it. So what's with the clothes? It's not about capitalism isn't the problem. It's thievery that's the problem, and taking advantage of ignorant people. What?
You still haven't addressed the point that I said. It's a business. It's a
Yes,
business.
it is a business.
And you don't
And
have to
that's
go there
not
to
a
be
religion. It's just a business.
Exactly.
I can be religious in my house.
Okay, I'm saying that it has nothing to do with faith. And it has nothing to do with capitalism if you're Bernie Madoff. It's theft.
Okay. We're
You're
not
a
disagreeing
scumbag
on
and a
that.
thief.
This would have been so much better if this was the vein of the conversation last week.
Thought I missed that.
Yeah.
Well, it was.
I know there's a very strong anti-religion sentiment in this group.
No,
And there's a,
I just said
Can I
the
speak?
problem isn't religion, and you're not acknowledging.
Bill, you
that I
don't have
said
to
it.
keep repeating
Yeah, we
the
all know
definition of
that.
religion every time we meet.
And I wasn't attacking religion. I was saying that the thing that everybody else was talking about being bad was a business.
No, that was me saying that.
But
else
everybody
wasn't.
was not in their heads when you were saying it.
see, so
It's
I
not
get,
religion that's the problem.
see, I get shouted down.
Well, because you keep saying the same thing over again, so I think you didn't listen the first time.
I get shouted down. I don't think that that is evidence that I am wrong about this. I think it is evidence that there is a very strong, non-rational attitude toward religion. Now, if I may just say this, I realize that within any religion or any group of pastors or ministers or whatever, there can be some who are indeed sociopathic and so forth, and indeed be trying to accumulate personal wealth. But I think to characterize all that way is an irrational process that is something that we engage in because we like to attack and look down upon other people in various ways. Now, of course, it's a business. Chris has a business. We have a place to meet. This place, we can't meet in this place unless somebody pays for this building. Now, he's doing it philanthropically, but he's making enough money in what he's doing to indeed bring this about. And just the fact that one is making money doing something doesn't mean that what they're doing is a bad thing. Most everything currently and in the indefinite past that we want to do that is in any way complex is going to cost money. And so there's a business aspect to it, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing.
Well, it becomes a bad thing if they say, to believe in this religion, you must give us money. Because that's an authority problem.
Yes,
Well,
in
so-
most churches, the donations are just that. You don't have to give money. It is encouraged because that's what keeps the church there and enables it to take place, of course.
And I agree with Bill when he says, like, I think there's a good reason for religion, because if they teach ethical behavior, that actually betters society. So I actually kind of agree with Bill where he's going with that.
Yeah, that's part of the sale of mainstream religion is they put on a facade, a face that they're selling morality and that they're selling a better quality of life and the statistics show that indeed their patronage is not better off morally than anybody else. So that throws that out immediately. Secondarily, is that it does. Statistically, they do no better than average, right? Than mainstream society.
The fact that something is not successful does not mean that the effort to do it is a bad thing to do.
Right, and the underlying philosophy of the core doctrine, if you take it all in its preponderance, right, is a negative orientation towards humanity. And what that's going to do is it's going to produce all types of manifestations of negative thinking, person to person, which then creates all kinds of crime, havoc, all kinds of them versus me mentality. It's so toxic.
Religion causes crime.
Absolutely.
Religious
Religion is so toxic
Christianity.
psychologically, right, that it makes people believe that they have core evil within them. Okay, that is a incredibly powerful disposition to put in someone's psychology, that they have something core innate in them that's evil, and the religion does a great job at that, of convincing people that. Because look at all the language. The language is so pervasive and it's widespread that it doesn't even be seen anymore. You're anointed. You're washed away. You're cleansed. All of the vernacular of Christianity is always tied into this core premise of that you're being cleaned of how dirty and bad you are. Okay, and that net psychology over the preponderance of your lifetime will manifest itself in all kinds of horrible psychological ways.
A lot of people.
That is very true.
A lot of people go to church because they are such scumbags. So I guess they're trying to balance it out. Like, you rob a few stores, stab a few people. I better get my ass to church.
Yeah, like the Godfather is loved by the priest because he pays the most, puts the most in the. So we have Flavia and then Corey. Go ahead, Flavia. We're listening.
Well, going back to what you were saying about the pastors, those mega churches. I have a friend. She's a flight attendant, and she works for a company. It's a private jet. It costs $10,000 just to rent the jet, just to say, hey, I want to, rent the jet, $10,000. I'm not going to say names because she tells me, people that fly, princes, but there's a major pastor that she tells me this guy does not fly.
Coach.
It costs every time he flies about $30,000, $35,000. Because you have $10,000 for the, and then you request what you want in the airplane, what kind of food, drinks, whatever. And he and his family, and we're talking about going on vacations, everything. So I can see, the church, making money, but that, to me, it's abuse. Especially with a mega church, you have like thousands of people in the church. Do you know who needs help? Do you know who can pay their power, the light bill, or they have food? That doesn't make that. It's not very, I don't know, much love or anything like that. So
you're saying it seems contradictory to the core values they supposedly are preaching?
Yeah, exactly. Because and one of the things that they do is trying to always, going back to the Bible, saying how, that you have to give a certain amount of money, and they actually preach about it. And, there are people that they cannot make money, and, they do give whatever. There is a percentage too, I believe. So that's all I have to say in regard to, how they spend the money, how the money is spent in the church.
I've heard of a lot of these things, but I don't see many of them firsthand, so that's a nice eyewitness account. Corey?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't think I've ever actually stood up for religion for in public, but Bart Ehrman, who I probably read more Bart Ehrman books than I have by any other author, even he says, look, when a natural disaster occurs, who's flooding to help the victims? It's churches. It's churches getting together in groups to go helping the victims. I'm not saying anything other than, it's getting people together and they're going and they're doing some good.
Yeah, if the society was organized into collections of community centers, the same phenomenon would happen just on behalf of the community center. It's just because that's the.
Is there a data model? Has that actually been done before somewhere?
It's done around the whole world. It doesn't matter what the religion is, what the church is, what the organizational bodies are. Everybody comes out during disasters and helps other people. It's just something that people do.
Yeah, these are two different
and what
things,
happens
just happen to be in the same building.
Right, and so
But America hasn't organized itself in any other way. Maybe there's nothing else, holding us together that would make us do those things.
It would be competition to the church.
Tim?
People do not get their morality from religion. Religion gets its morality from people.
There you go.
Fair enough. Yeah, please.
I have a lot of trouble with the hypocrisy of the religions that I have seen. Not just the hucksters and the whatever, even some where I admire the man at the top. But Francis is the primate of a church whose Savior said, if you have 2 coats, give one to someone who has no coat. Francis has got a platinum hat. Okay? He's got a platinum hat, solid platinum hat with jewels and stuff on it.
It's probably not even that comfortable a hat.
Automobile too.
I'm saying that
Just to hear
that
the word
all by
private hat
itself
makes me laugh.
is such a glaring hypocrisy
Yeah, I hope somebody shoots
that
it.
I don't understand.
Thanks.
I don't make myself a judge of Francis or any other prelate of the church or non-church, nor hookers and pimps on the street. I have my opinions. I don't mind hookers, I hate pimps, it's a personal thing. But it's not about my belief that I should stand in judgment on their souls or anything. However, when you're the head of a church that looks at money and says, well, this has Caesar's name on it, it must be Caesar's. Not, I should give 10% of it back to Caesar. No, it's got his name on it, it's his. Money is his. So it may sound like an unworkable way to be, but that's what our Savior said. Well, look at the money. Whose name is on it?
Well, then we
Well,
should use different money.
That's why
to
the
someone
United States
else.
put in God we trust, to bypass that argument, right?
Yeah, it should have to say
Actually, that's only,
underneath there.
it was a
So,
book up
It
with
should have to
50s,
say
so-
underneath there, and this is only money.
So to segue from that money concept is that people obviously can be seduced by money. So the concept here for tonight is the seduction of intelligence, right? Intelligence seducing us into this idea of like craving more and more intelligence and then sorting it out from there, and this idea of that it's obtainable somehow. It's like a holy grail to be able to figure things out, and like increasingly the goalpost moving constantly with technology and with advancements, and it's like impossible for everyone to know everything, and there's all these like despair built into it. But we start with the seduction piece, and here we talk about in the sexual seduction here is the first one, but that's not the orientation we're going for. We're going for definition 1.1 and 1.2 to entice someone to do or believe something inadvisable or foolhardy, right? Be seduce somebody. Right, so like you really need this Corvette, like maybe you can't afford it, but you're getting like sold by the salesperson that it'd be great for you. You'll look awesome in it. It suits you. Blah blah blah, and it's outside your budget. It's outside your practicality. Yet you leave with the Corvette. So you've been seduced by this vision in your head of like what this might be. This idea of something foolhardy, and then the second version definition here to attract powerfully, right? Something attracts you powerfully. And that does happen in money, it happens in religions, it happens in all kinds of facets of our lives. We do get attracted powerfully to things many times.
I like how they target the lawyer in the example. A lawyer had seduced a female client.
Of course, right?
Yeah.
So the first one, I said with mention of the first one here, so there is a sexual nature and sexual dynamic to intelligence that is very attractive to human beings. Is that women will report being attracted to men a lot of times based around a sense of humor. Sense of humor rates really high on all the Cosmo ranks of men, right? And so lots of times people that have a sharp or a well-honed sense of humor usually goes hand in hand with being quite intelligent as well. So like yeah, you can be kind of low-level funny, but at the same time, really witty people tend to be people that are intelligent. So that's a natural progression, a natural attractiveness there with intelligence and sexuality.
No, women like idiots with money.
Yeah, sure they
The
do.
thing is, when
Can I
Cosmo
speak for women?
and what was another one? Another much more mainstream
Neither can you.
one in the 60s
Oh,
and 70s.
Just one.
They did a thing about what's sexy about men.
Right.
And the number, it was only number 2, not number 1. However, on every page of the 100 sexiest men, the thing that was in the largest type, and it was listed second, was annual income.
What was number 1?
Buttocks.
Actually, it was,
I'm sorry, did I say that out loud?
Clothes.
of the top 10 things, the ones that weren't money, were all things you can buy.
You
Yes.
buy almost anything.
I
think I'm
ran
looking in the
across
wrong
something
place then.
also that women, when men display anger, it is attractive to people and people look up to the person. When women express anger, they are considered to be emotional and
Right.
so forth.
So there's a whole range of emotions we can attach to the characteristic sexual hormones, like male testosterone and female estrogen, that would then be prominent in display, right? That go on naturally with those characteristic hormones. So like a male is going to have a deeper voice. A male is going to have the more chiseled jaw, right? That all that type of stuff. Facial hair, all this kind of stuff. Those things that are characterized. People that take large doses of testosterone are known to roid rage, right? And get these outbursts of anger and outbursts of physical and emotional aggression. And so there's lots of studies that show those natural desire for those features, even if they're not logically desirable, right? Because they're characteristic of the sexual hormones that are underlying them. So like, all the stuff that comes with estrogen, the nurturing, the soft, and all that, the loving stuff. But, there's, and then from what I understand, that around the time of ovulation, a woman is more attracted to those features than when she's not, right? So that extra surge of estrogen then causes those desires to kind of amplify a little bit.
She wears less clothes.
Well, I certainly say I'm turned off by anger.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah, I think more intelligent, more civilized people will have a
Okay.
tendency to think more logically about their approach and have attenuated themselves to having revulsion to those type of things. Whereas like maybe average or below average intelligent people don't really sense it like that. They're just vulnerable to it. It's interesting. It's very interesting. But this idea behind seduction here is to basically is believe something inadvisable or foolhardily. So couldn't there be an inadvisable or foolhardily approach to intellectualism? Right? That's kind of like the mystery we're trying to unravel here. And the answer is yes, very much so, right? And we'll get into that. So next is like, what is intelligence here? So going off definition 1, the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. And I think the key to this is the apply knowledge and skills. Because the application of knowledge is definitely what I believe is intelligence, not just the possession of knowledge. If it was just the possession of knowledge, Google would be the smartest person in the world.
Intelligence is prediction.
Okay, well that's not one of the definitions, but that's a good.
I think there's a question about that. A person could be quite intelligent as measured by intelligence tests and have impairments that lead to not being able to apply that intelligence.
So would you then assume that that person has a gap in their intelligence? Do they have an intellectual blind spot then?
Not necessarily.
No?
An inability to make use of it. Like how is a person going to make use of the intelligence? It usually involves some interaction with other people in some way. And if a person has difficulty interacting with other people, they can be very intelligent but still have that difficulty, and it can impair their ability to apply their knowledge.
So that would just
Down
be
here it
that would
talks
just be applied to book smarts though, because there's knowing facts, but there's also like knowing how to interact with people.
Mhm.
That's knowledge as well. So if you know lots of facts but you don't know how to interact with people, then that's a gap of intelligence.
So Chris, are you
Social
saying we should
intelligence.
use
Yeah.
definition number 1 there for tonight's purposes?
Yes,
Okay,
that is what I'm saying.
okay.
And so, like, what I'm saying is, how can be in possession of intelligence? How can that, in and of itself, seduce us into doing things and thinking things that are not good for us, that are actually have a seductive quality? Going back to the seductive definition here, inadvisable or foolhardy. So how can the acquisition and application of knowledge turn out to be a foolhardy thing to do? It seems counterintuitive. It seems like, well, we should want all the knowledge that we can possibly obtain, because then we'd be better informed, and then we'd likely be able to apply it and make better decisions. That's the logic. But is that necessarily the truth?
In response to what you were saying, yes, there can be deficits in social intelligence, understanding social interaction and so on. But there can be other things like a severe panic disorder or significant depression or obsessive compulsive disorder or something like that. The person can be highly intelligent and still quite disabled and unable to make use of that intelligence. So I'm just saying that might be an inaccuracy in this definition.
Depends on what you mean by intelligence. Seems to me that most tests are like, what do you call it, trivia. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
a lot of people can do great in trivia,
Sure.
but they can't repair the something simple around the house. What they're good at is going to the yellow pages and finding somebody who can do the job for them. I mean, they don't have any common sense.
Yeah, sure.
Which is a type of intelligence that's pretty valuable, I believe.
The most valuable.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what your needs are. There's another definition of intelligence that's used to define military intelligence. And that is...
I cut that off the definition.
Yes, because it's a body of information that is specifically desirable at one particular point for one particular reason. Well, that's a great idea, except for the fact that one of the things we found out is if you wait until you need it, it's too late. Uniformly the case that if you're in military intelligence, you want to have the answers to the questions they're going to be asking me in a decade, not the questions they're asking me now. So it all is about information. How to acquire it, how to process it, how to use it, how to recall it. All of those things are aspects of intelligence. And applying that to one person, you're saying overall, they have the ability to acquire information, and they have the ability to sort information into useful
Sure.
and non-useful, and they have the ability to recall it.
So by this limited definition, let's consider someone's net intelligence. Okay, if we were to have like a measuring system, we could say this person acquires and applies knowledge, and we look across all these different areas and facets of life. Okay, and then we use the average score of all that to give them a net score of how intelligent they are. Okay, well, if someone was scored high mostly across the board and was considered by this arbitrary measuring abstract that I'm talking about right now, right? What then negative effects would that cause them in their lives? That's what this discussion's about, right? Like, yes, we can break down all these micro facets of intelligence, and that would be really useful and interesting to do it. But in a general sense, I would say that you can have people flounder quite badly in some areas, but then still overall be quite intelligent people. Is that true?
Yeah.
Like, so have you ever seen a really fat, intelligent person? Well, they're failing in the nutrition and wellness piece, right? They get a low mark in that intelligence score. They're not applying the knowledge of...
Chris Langan.
Well,
He's a fat, smart guy.
Whoever. I mean, yeah, whoever. I mean, I'm overweight, so I'm like, you know, if I want to consider myself smart, I have to be fair and score myself low in that category, right? So that's an area of my intelligence I want to work on and improve.
I think that there's one other factor, and that has to do with whether the environment that this highly intelligent child grows up in is one that enables the child to acquire knowledge and skills. It can be a purely environmental thing, or a cultural thing. A culture that promotes obesity.
Sure.
That's going to be a reason for the obesity, not a lack of intelligence.
Sure. So let's take a box and say this is that any given individual's entire factors, okay? And then within this, the person with all that are in the similar situation in their community, in the same environment, the same culture, the same microculture, all that, right? And then you have a bell curve distribution of intelligence within that. And let's say that this person is in the, somewhere in the second or third or beyond standard deviations of intelligence to the right, okay? So a person that finds themselves in this kind of bracket within their context, you can even put it within their own context, what happens in that person's life? What kind of things do they suffer from? What are the problems that are going to arise for them just by the fact that they're in this clipping level of within their own context?
People try to disadvantage them because they know the answers that makes other people look bad.
Yeah, so people in this zone or below might try to undermine that person. That's one of the things that are on. So that's what we're talking about, right?
What about frustration with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The stupid processes. Yeah.
That can possibly attribute maybe to the topic a couple weeks back, I think, about social economic mobility.
Absolutely, huge factor in that. Absolutely, I would definitely say that would be a huge factor.
Smart people
Chris
want
is
easier
trying
to
them
make
all
money.
together for us. He's got religion going, he's got nutrition going.
Let's not do that.
Yeah.
So this is one thing that fell out of this intellectual pursuit of this information, okay? And saying like expectations of self and others then would be a strain, a stress point, a strenuous point in your life if you were in that kind of category of your intelligence.
Yeah, smart people's got lots of answers to everything, and hardly anybody else wants to listen to it.
Yeah, so let's say that I was a mega millionaire and I'm up here talking to y'all. And first of all, that mega millionaire would put me in an outlier status because most people aren't mega millionaires, right? So that would give me automatic some credibility. And then you also know that the reason I'm a mega millionaire is because I created a computer algorithm that helps trade stocks on Wall Street. And so now I have two or more kind of things working for me, and I might be really well dressed in $1,000 suits. And I have all these things working for me. And so what I have now is I have the credibility automatically built in. And I have this automatic assumption that I'm an intelligent person, okay? And then you learn that I was a disaster as a father, and that I was a terrible husband, and that before I made this algorithm, I had no idea how to manage my money properly. I was a complete train wreck, and other people manage it for me. It's going great. You know what I mean? And you find all of these things about me. You might believe that, okay, you might learn that this guy is really strong in some areas, but in other areas of intelligence, it's really lacking. But that's now becomes a major embarrassment point to me if I was this person. Because I want people to believe that I'm that smart person. That benefits me.
Yeah, you couldn't be bothered to do all those things. You was thinking about other things.
Right. So some CEO that's really great at his job, he comes home and kicks the dog upside down and smacks the wife around. That's cool, right? Because he's really good at CEO.
You didn't say anything about violence.
I'm just saying, really deficient intellectually or intelligent-wise in other areas, okay, would then be a vulnerability to someone that's regarded, has a reputation, if you will, of being really intelligent, okay? If they're then when they fall short in other areas, which probably naturally they do, that would serve as a very much an embarrassment point. It would serve as a point that would decay their social capital and would be a point of contention. Whereas before they were in the spotlight as an intelligent person, or monikered as an intelligent person, there was a no issue. You see what I mean?
Oh, like people focus on a celebrity's sex life instead of say the things they produce.
It might prevent them from becoming a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah.
No, actually.
Right. So this person also could suffer. I put expectation of self and others. This person could also suffer then by when they are so deficient in another part of their life, and they can't figure out another part in their life. That individual might suffer as well from that same effect. Like, why can't I do this? Why can't that could be a really big frustration point then if they regarded themselves as just average intelligent or were just average intelligent. So being a heightened intelligence could really cause some internal and external pressure, negative pressure, that might be kind of a blind spot here. So also, people are going to assume that you're a top performer in both broad spectrum categories, right? So like if they sat you down and expected you to do a complex task and you had no idea how to do the complex task, that would be breaking their expectations. So yeah, please.
Yeah, so the guy who made the video game called Fez, he said that for like 4 years or so, he was very frustrated that he couldn't build it. He was unsure if he could finish building the game, and he decided he was just going to kill himself if he didn't finish it. So that was his reward to himself at the end of building it, that he got to live.
Jeez.
So people push themselves really hard when they think they're capable of something.
That's actually the drive. That is actually one of the upcoming slides. Yeah.
This is like when you put like a professional athlete in front of the camera, and like they like can't read a cue card and look at the camera at the same time, and you're just like, oh my god, like I thought this guy was a rock star. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And that goes across the board, right? We would expect Steve Jobs, right? Or better yet, that other guy from Microsoft, whatever. We'd expect the guy, not Bill Gates, the other guy,
Steve Ballmer.
Yeah, Steve Ballmer. We'd expect him to be like a rock star and be able to come up on stage and sell a product. But when he does it, he falls on his face. Like, so they stopped making him do that, right? Like he was just like stumbled and just looks all awkward and completely. I wouldn't want to buy a thing from that guy. So where he was great in creating products and just genius as far as computer software and algorithms, when it comes to like showmanship and sales and no, get that guy away, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. But the assumption then is that the internal expectation of oneself and even the external expectation might be you're smart at everything. If you're so smart in that area, man. So that's why people are listening to Einstein about social issues. What the hell does Einstein know about society issues, social issues? No, he knows about E equals MC squared, relativity, that he's an awesome physicist, but it doesn't mean he knows about social issues. But then people quote him all the time on the things he said about society because he's regarded as someone that was so smart.
Well, maybe we should listen to the hillbillies.
Well, maybe we should listen to Einstein about society. Maybe we should listen to a social scientist about society. You see what I'm saying? A very well-established, super hyper-intelligent genius in social sciences. Maybe we should listen to someone like that about society, not Einstein.
Well, I listen to him if he's proven that he's smart already.
So you're falling into that trap.
Whereas I would look for the most reliably kind, considerate, caring person that I'd ever met and ask him or her
That's
to make judgments.
Find someone you know personally, who you actually know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do you scale it?
I'm not looking for a smart guy to tell me how to make the world a better place.
Right.
If smart guys could do that, we'd be there.
Yeah,
We'd
nice
have
person.
been there.
A lot of smart
We'd
guys
have
have
plenty
been
of
there.
smart guys.
Well, Einstein has thousands of quotables that you could find on the internet. You have thousands of things that he said that are completely ridiculous, that are just wrong, that are ugly statements, that are gross, that are.
And by the way, he
Not
didn't
inclu-
say most of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. Yes. I'd have to then do a deep dive, but
It's
my
like
point is that just because someone is a great physicist, he didn't have a very good relationship with his wife. Right? Doesn't mean that by then default you're a genius in every other area, but yet the stigma of that is there. It's omnipresent. Right? So that's one thing of being in that outlier that could be a pain point. Yeah. Of course.
Do you think it might be true that when people are so good at some things, maybe they're like statistically very bad at other things? Just like how like Steve Jobs, he only had one outfit, and he had a very poor diet. And his house was completely empty because he couldn't decide on furniture. They focus so much on this one thing that in all other aspects of life they're terrible.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Or possibly you have someone that is way smarter than Steve Jobs, but isn't so good in one thing that they never get that kind of stage, right?
Yeah.
There could be some people that are way smarter than Steve Jobs because on all metrics, boy, they score way higher than Steve Jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't have that one specialty thing that set them apart, that gave them that nostalgia of being in that group of so intelligent.
Yeah.
Right? That didn't mark them as someone that's in that intelligent category.
Yeah.
So that's actually one of the slides, actually. So we'll keep going here. So here's something else that people do when they're people that are really thoughtful people and highly intelligent people have a tendency to overthink many, many things. Okay, and overthinking can lead to this one really kind of net negative thing, which is a hyperactive inner life. inner life that one has. And by that hyperactive, they can't shut their brain off. They can't stop thinking about these things in complexity. From what I understand, Einstein, this wasn't a thing about Einstein tonight, but from what I understand, I've read someplace in the history I've read about him where he'd sometimes like have problems with the bathroom because he would be so focused on solving the problems, so focused in the physics that he would push off going to the bathroom until it was too late. Right? So I can imagine that being true for people that are really smart and that are really focused and can really get hyper and absorbed into something, being so absorbed into it that they can't stop. They have to keep going. And they're hyperactive in this inner life.
A lot of people think of the bathroom as a place to do extra thinking.
Yeah. And then when they reach that kind of point, then maybe they're 30 minutes late for that appointment that was important, that social engagement that was important. They left the person sitting at the restaurant for 30 minutes, their close friend, because they had to finish that. They were so close, they knew they could say, yeah, you get the idea. This idea of deep sensitivity. Some people that are extreme in their intelligence, emotional intelligence, can get wrapped up in how their sentiments are, their empathy towards others, and wrapped up in emotions and feelings so much that they can't get out of it. Right?
It's called rumination and malingering.
Good words.
Wow, I should write that down.
I like how it's about malingering.
Those are fantastic words. Where did that come from, Jim?
Long after you're still living.
That's kind of crap. I waste a lot of time.
Those are fantastic words.
Great ones.
Then there's this over-emotional dynamic as well. You can do this over-emotional, and that can manifest itself on the anger, or the over-jubilous misappropriation of some emotions. Like, I have this one friend that I think is hyper-genius, and whenever he tells a story about something terrible and tragic, like a real story about something tragic, he laughs, and it kills him socially. Trust me, it kills him socially. But what happens is that's all he knows how to. He just misses that point. He can't help it. He laughs because it's so like he's like self coddling
so
himself.
retarded?
No, it's not retarded. He's like
no, I mean because the thing he's laughing about is so retarded.
Yeah, it's like
it didn't happen to me.
No, he doesn't really think it's funny though. That's the thing. He doesn't think it's funny, but it comes at his laughter as almost like a safety mechanic for him. Like like it's okay, like
it's a stress reduction.
Stress reduction. Yeah.
I hate people who lie with their laughs.
No, it's not. It's not. It's a natural response for him to something that's bothering him so much emotionally that he doesn't have the right emotions. So he'll be like, haha, it'll come out later.
Okay.
So I've seen this happen. Is what I'm saying.
I got to say that you're talking about things that a lot of people do, and they're not negative factors in their life.
Yeah.
They are hyperactive in their heads about things, and they still attend to the things they need to do to have a life, a roof, food, cover their debts, or whatever, but they don't ever stop thinking.
Right. I'm saying people that can do these things to a point where it's harmful to their life.
Yeah, but they could also flip coins or play Monopoly or bet at the track to a point where that was, and whether or not you win, I'm sorry, you hang around the track a lot, that's going to have a negative effect on your life.
So these are both bad. Thinking too much and gambling too much. They're both bad. Yeah.
It's too much.
Too much.
The problem
Yeah.
is.
Excess. Yeah.
Not thinking. It's too much. But the fact is that you talk about a hyperactive inner life, and all my life, people have been giving me the advice: don't think about it, just do it. I can't do that.
Don't think. That's a stupid thing to say.
I cannot stop thinking about something, especially if I'm going to be doing it. And I don't ever have a moment when I'm not, and usually including when I'm sleeping, but never except when I'm in deep sleep, that I'm not thinking.
Hey, don't think, come to
So
church.
Michael, not to call you out, but how did that help you in the military? It led to some major consequences from the discussions we've had in the military, right?
I was a really bad soldier, yeah.
Right, so there's an example of someone who's really smart. Sorry, but I regard you as being highly intelligent. That having that possession of that increased intelligence then presented a difficulty in your life. You know?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Being intelligent isn't just always a good thing, is the point of this
Personally, I
conversation.
always felt it was the being in the Army part that was the problem, but okay, I guess it was me.
So let's do Steve and then Wendy. Sorry, I didn't know who was first. But.
I was an instructor in the Army, and I would get up there and I would use these big words. I'd just string big word after big word after big word, and these people out in the audience would be dumbfounded. They had no idea what I was talking about.
What'd you do it for?
So I got bad marks. Well, that's how I talked. I was just being natural. So they told me I had to dumb it down.
And so there's another example. You're just being yourself, using your intelligence, and what that did is it caused your message to then, what you were trying to say, not be conveyed to the audience, right?
Yeah, and I developed a course once. It was some kind of finance course, and it was an analysis of like 7 different financial reports. And I studied each of those reports, and I figured out what was common about them and how they were different. And I made this one slide that included all 7 reports and all of the similarities, and I explained it in detail to the audience, and they had no idea what the hell I was talking about.
Right. When you make a PowerPoint, you don't put like a book on a page.
That's true.
That's true.
There's an art to
Let them
making a
teach you how to do
PowerPoint.
your
There's an art to
presentations.
making a PowerPoint.
yeah. Well, I was just going to say that these days there's a term, highly sensitive people, that they call themselves HSPs. They even have a meetup.
Oh, okay.
Got books about it, and you know. So
Highly sensitive people.
I would argue that if you were to go into that group of highly sensitive people and be fortunate enough to be able to test them on their intelligence, I bet on average they would be on the upside of intelligence.
Yeah.
That would be my prediction.
yeah.
I would also predict they've been traumatized.
Maybe
Which
so.
people?
Maybe so. Maybe so. Tim.
Part of what you're describing may be psychomotive dysfunctionality.
It's like 4
You
words
need to make
now.
me a
You
list.
said-
You need to make a
yeah.
word list for tonight so I
Yeah.
can go study.
Yeah.
Psycho what?
Psychomotive dysfunctionality.
Psychomotive. Yeah.
When I think about things, I don't necessarily do what I think.
Which people are we talking about?
You're lost in your head and know that your house is on
Oh,
fire.
those people.
And instead of putting the fire out in your house, you just go to the cooler place of the house instead and hang out and think about it.
So this guy who looks like Doogie Howser is saying, "I'm sorry, I can't hear you over the sound of how awesome I am." And so, one thing about intelligent people that they will likely suffer from, or could easily suffer from, is this seemingly idea that they're arrogant. They seem very socially arrogant. They're better than other people. They come across that way because they know it all, right? Who likes a know-it-all?
Well, smart people are better than dumber people, on average.
Well,
No, they're just smarter.
you're.
The smarter you are, the better you are.
Define
on average.
better. Define. Yeah, give us your formula.
That's what you
That's
value,
your
Ben.
ignorance speaking.
Well, that's very interesting. I think there's a stereotype that's true.
Well, let's say you're going to save a group of smart people or a group of dumb people, and you don't know anything more about them. Which group you going to save?
How have you determined if they're smart or dumb?
Well, you just happen to know. Don't pick it apart.
We have an integrated environment, Ben, and really smart
Don't
people
think
have
about
given
it.
us the nuclear
I'm being
bomb.
the smart person, not you.
And they also gave us like that nuclear power plant that's like 30 miles from my house that's providing power to people.
Flavia, do you have something?
Just going back to what you're saying, how your brain is always working. Like my brain's like that all the time. I can't even sleep. It's just going like 24/7. It's one after another. And it's so. I went to the doctor and he told me I'm ADHD. He told me I was intelligent.
Yeah, but you don't need pills for being intelligent. You need pills for ADHD.
Awesome. Great point. Great point.
That I'm smart. I'm not ADHD.
So
Well, there is an extreme, of course,
Yes.
hypomania and
Right.
mania,
Right.
whereas in bipolar disorder.
Sure. So Flavia, definitely that I didn't touch that, but definitely there is brain chemistry issues that can be manifest and be really,
Detrimental.
that might not have anything to do with intelligence. It could be a brain dysfunction. Yeah. I'm not saying you have brain dysfunction. But
Thanks, Chris.
I would argue that you're probably pretty intelligent. I've had some conversations with you in the past. I'll err on that side, please, Michael.
I have a friend who's a really nice lady and very, very, very bright. But she remembers the exact time and date of everything that ever happened that was traumatic in her life.
Mhm.
Every single event. So her life is a lot now at 55 years of age. It's a series of anniversaries of tragedies in her life.
Mhm.
There's the day that she took the day off work and everybody at work got murdered and left in the walk-in freezer. There's, I mean, and
Because of her?
no, she just took the day off.
Oh.
And the guy came in and robbed the place, shot them all, and put them in
But
the
it
walk-in.
doesn't make it more traumatic to know that, to remember the date of it.
No, it just gives you a time every year when it reminds you of it.
Yeah.
Only she's got something. I mean, everybody has bad stuff happen to her, and she remembers every bit of it. She does remember the good stuff, but that doesn't seem to help.
It
Yeah.
doesn't have a birthday, huh?
So
It gets a birthday, but it doesn't. And she also knows exactly who remembers her birthday.
right, the brain is wired to be more efficient at memory. That for memory is skewed towards negativity.
Negative, yeah.
Well,
It's
maybe-
selective for negativity.
But
Maybe
anyway,
she should stop using the Gregorian calendar and she
Well-
wouldn't be traumatized.
except it makes it hard to keep appointments if you do things like that. She actually lives,
Lunar
you're
calendar.
not going to understand this, but she lives in a place that's called the real world.
No,
And
it
lots
can
of things
convert
that you
automatically.
have, no, lots of things you have to do if you live in the real world that involve how other people do stuff. I'm just letting you know you're going to
I
run
mean,
into that.
you
You're
like
going
get
to
a
run
half
into
free
that
phone with that.
eventually.
See, so correcting
You use
people
a
is one of the
different time,
things.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering about is, from the write-up you did for what we were going to discuss tonight, the issue of despair
Yeah, we're
and
getting there.
what we might be able to do about it. Now,
Yes.
I'm wondering whether you're going to get that far.
I think so. I hope
Okay.
so. So, correcting people
Isn't
is
that
something
the high
that.
school debate club, just like where they, have you seen it where like they just like basically rap, they speak at like 200 words per minute just to get all their points across?
Oh yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, yeah, just to get to the end, yeah, because
Yeah.
I think Bill really wants to get to that part, so yeah.
All right, so this is I think we kind of covered this part pretty clearly, right? This is a pretty simplified idea here, is that people will seem socially arrogant that are intelligent people can come across very easily as being socially arrogant because they might have a tendency to correct people on their facts when their facts are wrong, right? Or sometimes they talk in a way in which they know everything, right? You know, I can't tell you anything, you know everything.
No,
So-
smart people don't talk like they know a lot more than they do because that is a dumb thing to do.
Well, I reckon that I've met many people that are intelligent that act like they know everything, and it's very annoying.
So what about the despair?
Yeah, okay. I'll go to the last slide. So there's only 2 more slides, so we're good. So the known unknowns is where this despair starts coming into play. Okay, so the last 2 are this one specifically. This is the best slide that goes into the despair aspect. Okay, so when we hit this threshold of knowledge of that we are going to not be able to obtain the appropriate level of knowledge to sort things out that are important. Okay, that is going to lead to a desperate situation or a situation of despair. And so what I mean by that is like knowing your limitations. When you're a child, there's nothing not possible, right? When you're a child, like Santa will fix everything or whatever. Like there's always that childhood exuberance that will have unexhaustible hope. Okay. Well, when we get into the real world, we start to find out intellectually if we have sufficient intelligence, one can realize that there's going to be some things that they were not going to be able to solve. And there are going to be some problems that are bigger than us or not obtainable within current levels of science, technology. There's just, no matter where you look, there is no answer to some problems.
And most of them because the average people don't want to put in any effort to solve it.
That's right. And the pressure of society rewarding the specialization also is where tons of despair comes in, because you can be a hyper-intelligent person but not be hyper-focused and not have that core speciality, and you will suffer because you won't get the rewards of other people that have scored low in many areas, aspects of intelligence, but extremely high in one. The Einstein thing again, here we go again. You cannot obtain that Einstein level of credibility. You'll never get there because you didn't make E = mc². and you never will. But boy, you're good at your social life, you're good at your intellectual, you're good at your core, everything, on all the measures you're tracking, and your care, and your high morality, and you're working to get all these measures up as high as you can in your life, and you're concerted about it, right? You're doing it with intent and purpose.
And Elizabethan poetry.
Yeah. And you still will hit this despair because it now becomes into focus that these big problems will remain unsolved. They will remain unsolved in your lifetime. And the realization of that is extremely painful, but it takes a high level of intelligence to realize that. It doesn't just, this doesn't happen to someone with a retarded level of intelligence quotient, right? The person that would be classified in the opposite extreme, in the retard category, right, would not have despair over the knowledge of the unknowns in their lives where they're missing the gaps of the big problems of life not being solved. Okay?
Are you not really talking about one's perception or understanding of one's place in the dominance hierarchy? In other words, whether people are looking up to you or looking down upon you, or whether you will ultimately achieve that where they will look up to you and then finding out that, well, no, I'm not going to make it. Isn't the despair coming from this awareness of one's place in the dominance hierarchy?
There are bigger things in the world.
I would say yes, but I say yes to that, but only in a small quantity. I think the majority of it is actually just the realization, the coming to terms with the reality of that it takes high intelligence to understand.
It doesn't necessarily mean dominance hierarchy. There can be other things that are disappointing and despair-making in people's intellectual lives. I have a friend who's an astronomer, a visual light astronomer, actually gets time on telescopes. I mean, he's up there in the above the stratosphere, because if you actually have time on a telescope, you're a major force in astronomy.
Right.
And he has. But the thing that bothers him the most is that there's a thing. And he knows it's there because he's done so much research about the way it forces other things to move. Then he knows it's there, and he knows it's something huge, but it's exactly on the opposite side of our galaxy. So he'll never, ever.
So there's something in the way you're seeing it.
Yeah, the whole galaxy. And he'll never, ever get to see it. And it really makes him feel bad. Here I am. I've spent my lifetime in a field narrowed down within that huge field to where I can't ever see the thing I want to see.
Why is he so interested in that particular thing at that point?
Because everything you ever saw, everything you know about, everything whose name you ever heard, everything that any person you ever heard of has heard of, is moving towards that thing at 4 million miles an hour.
That's crazy.
I'm not clear. Of course, there are various things that we can feel bad about, the loss of a loved person or whatever. But with regard to this issue that you're talking about, I mean, the whole presentation has been about one's position in the social hierarchy and whether one is successful or not. And you're saying that the idea of one finding that one is not going to be able to maintain or get to an expected place in the hierarchy is a small element. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing that as the main one. I don't just the fact that I am not going to be able to discover the something that will unify, relativity and quantum mechanics and so forth doesn't mean, or that may never be accomplished.
Okay, so let me answer you exactly to you, right? Because we've spent lots of time together, we know each other well. Is that the idea of humanity to you is very good intellectual work, a good intellectual work. In fact, I think you'd probably call it your lifetime work, if you will, right? And to your intelligence, you know, it's not just a large amount of effort. It's also, to your mind, a really good piece of intellectualism. Of course it would. If it wasn't, you wouldn't be advocating for it, right? And so the idea that that would never go beyond you, okay, certainly then causes you despair. Because you have an intellectual insight that...
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I have come to accept that it is probably a failed project. It's not been my life endeavor. For 50 years, I was doing something else and trying to do it well and so forth. I do want to regard myself as a good person, but I realize what the concept of humanity is up against, and that's part of what humanity is about. So
yeah, so inevitably there's a despair factor to this creation of intellectualism that you've put forward.
It is somewhat depressing, but
it has nothing to do with hierarchy. It has nothing to do with where you sit socially. That was my point there. That's why I went there. So I'm sorry, Michael, and let's let Michael.
I don't think that the position of the planet Earth in the galaxy is a consequence of a dominance hierarchy that has caused my friend this distress. I don't think
I didn't follow that.
Well, you tried to say that what my friend felt over not being able to accomplish the thing he's been working on for the last 25 years in astronomy was because the center of the galaxy is in the way.
I said that.
Well, you then went on to your little usual heartstrings of dominance hierarchy in our place and whether people are looking up. My friend Phil can give a damn about that.
Bill,
he wants to see.
Bill, please admit that most of the problems in the world are not due to humans, but are due to the world around.
Why admit to that?
For example, what if we just had a bunch of gold laying around? We wouldn't have any shortage of gold.
Yeah, but of course there are all sorts of problems that we humans do not create. What I'm concerned about is the ones that we do create where we don't actually have to. And so you can't stop tornadoes and so forth.
Well, maybe we can.
If you can, then fine. But in other words, there are all sorts of things that are not a product of our behavior. Of course, the increase in tornadoes probably is, but the
all right. Well, we agree with you. Okay.
But the question is, how much of our pain, suffering, disability, and early death is caused by the decisions that we make?
So, Bill, let me come at it from one more angle. I think I can.
Okay.
It just popped in my head. I think that would solve this, right? Is that for me personally, I know that in order for me to obtain a majority of my goals, I would have to be very specialized because that's what society rewards. I'm not. I can see it. I see that intellectually clear. I also see intellectually clear that when history showing us that when all new technologies unfold, some diabolical son of a bitch out there is going to try to find some way to make it into a weapon, no matter what it is, right? To dominance hierarchy, somebody else, sure. I do not want to participate in that paradigm in any capacity, okay? In fact, I would like to advocate against that on all fronts. Of course I would. But in order for me to do that, I would then have to take away from my speciality to some speciality that society will reward me from so I can obtain my goals. And I'd have to dilute my specialization to where I wouldn't have a specialization anymore, right? To then focus on another aspect of society. And there's so many of them that I'm just caught in despair because I can't do shit about any of them.
As long as you give everybody the weapons at once, it'll be fine.
Does that make sense? There's so many things that I'm aware of that I know if I worked focused on, I could have some impact on, positive impact, right? But there's so many things that I'm intellectually aware of that are effed up in this world that I can't touch, but hardly any of them in my lifetime. Okay, and that causes me despair.
Yeah, well, I understand.
In fact, I wish I didn't know shit about any of them and could just focus on my little world, because I'd be a lot happier a lot of times, you know.
But I think
sorry. I want to get Corey and Tim before we run out of time.
I just think that a lot of this has to do with attitude And
Probably
like
so.
your state of mind versus intelligence, because you could be someone who maybe doesn't know anything about this, but you could be sitting all day contemplating chicken or egg, chicken or egg, chicken or egg. It doesn't have to do. It doesn't have to do with knowing so many things that you have despair of them. It's just acceptance. There's some things we might never know. Maybe someone's working towards them. Maybe they won't. That's okay. That's all there is to it. Acceptance.
So when Siddhartha saw down the alleyway and saw the people that he wasn't supposed to see, okay, and saw the people that were depraved, and saw the people that were the dirt poor, the poorest of poor, and saw them in a diseased state and suffering, and those were his people under his kingdom and under his rule, he instantly acquired tremendous despair. That acquisition of that knowledge became a massive point of despair. And if you go to sub-Saharan Africa and you look at how people are living, if you go to the southern Caribbean slums, and you see how your fellow human beings are, or when you see the Ebola patient who's sitting at the door of the clinic and won't be let in, it's just too much. It's intellectually, you can, if you want to dive into one of those problems, you can have an impact on it positively intellectually. But there's so many in it. You're so divided when you become aware, when you intellectually become aware of the world. There's so many pain points that it puts you into a certain state of despair. And you can do like what I do mostly, which is, I'm embarrassed to say it, but basically what I do to the overwhelming majority of those things is I tune them out. I don't even listen to it because it's just too much, right? And maybe I'll do that to some degree as well. I would assume maybe so.
It's better to acknowledge it and accept it, seriously, than to tune it out.
I can't accept it. That's my problem. I cannot accept.
That is your problem.
That is my problem. It is.
That's your problem.
No, Chris, when you say that, I think you mean you plan for it to change, but you still believe it is true now.
I think a key concept has to do with one's sphere of influence. There are 7 billion people, plus or minus, on the planet, and not everybody can have worldwide impact. But the people that are closest to you, you have a significant impact upon. So it's how you treat people who are closest to you. And of course, you're the center of your sphere of influence, so you need to treat yourself well, take good care of yourself so that you're capable of having a beneficial effect within your sphere of influence. But just because a person has a small sphere of influence, maybe the person is in a nursing home and at least has an effect upon the people that are taking care of the person. Doing a good job of that is, I think, the key to having a life that you feel okay about. But that means working on your personal ethics, trying to understand what kind of impact you're having on the people around you. And some people are, for whatever reason, going to have a much larger sphere of influence, of course.
So really complex issues also intellectually can freeze people. You can get frozen because you can take so many angles of so many different complexities in solving one issue that there's like, you reach to a point where you realize that there's no way that I can acquire enough information to make an informed choice, and then be frozen and make no choice, which is a choice in and of itself. Yeah. But that's another trap. But Tim?
In my many years in churches, I've always seen and heard other people talking about a very popular Christian verse known as the Prayer of Serenity. And I think the circumstances, some of them that's been described tonight, really describes why that prayer of serenity is so popular, especially in religious organizations, especially in Christian organizations. Most of my experience was in Protestant organizations. That prayer of serenity is, God, what is it? God, give me courage to change the things I can, ability to accept the things I can't, and wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah. Okay. How did that play into despair at all?
Not being able to know what you can change. Not knowing there's so many things, like you said, you see all these many avenues of despair. You can only go down one of them in the hope of doing some benefit.
Right, that's
The
what I'm
word
saying,
is-
and
the
knowing,
word
knowing
is-
that is creating
The word is
despair.
acceptance. In
Yeah.
other words,
No, but that's
if you have
barrier for me.
expectations that are unrealistic, expectations that you cannot meet, then that produces negative feeling, negative self-esteem, and so forth.
And would intelligent people be plagued by that, perhaps?
I think anyone could be.
So that's,
Yeah.
but I mean,
It
I would
depends upon
reckon
their
more
expect-
intelligent people would be more plagued by that premise.
I don't know. It depends upon their expectations. I think that people who are not intelligent and in poverty can be quite depressed and miserable. So I'm not sure that despair is just for us superior people.
So let's let Wendy have the final word.
Speak for
It's,
yourself, I'm not
it's
saying
8:58. Let's
Okay.
let Wendy get the final word in, then we'll close.
Okay, well,
We can talk after.
I think the special case is a young adolescent. It's somebody that's becoming newly acutely aware of the world and all its problems, yet they do not have the maturity and the balance in their life yet to know how to distract themselves from it like we do.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great insight. I had that as like the #1 slide, and I took it out because I knew it would take the whole time of our conversation. I was going to do the Piaget learning phases, and then go break down each one, and then how you come into the age of reason, and then that's where the despair starts to come in. Because when you're a child, you believe in Santa Claus and everything's a miracle and everything's possible, and then reality, when you hit the age of reason, you get that cognitive level of development. You're like, wait a minute. Reality, sucks in many ways, and then teen angst is the blanket term they use for that. When
Yep.
teenagers get to that phase of their cognitive development, they hit this period almost inevitably where they're depressed, like a micro depression,
Yeah,
because they see shit. The world isn't a fairy tale.
Right, but perhaps a lot of that has to do with the child is a focus of attention and has a very high place within the family. When the child goes out into the broad world, that's a decline in one's place within the hierarchy.
That didn't happen to my kids because I specifically made that a point. Well, so many times.
They ever left.
Yeah, I didn't tell them that they weren't special. I, of course, told them that they were special, but I made them well aware of that upcoming realization. Yeah, and that helped quell that quite a bit. But there's a whole host of other things I have no knowledge of that they're now suffering from. Yeah. So, sure, Ben, you have the final word.
So on the sphere of influence, there's only two relevant sizes. A few people, your personal life, your friends or whatever, and the global. Because something will either, for each person a thing spreads to, it will spread from them to either more than one or less than one persons on average. So if every person if it spreads to 1.1 people, then it becomes a meme or a paradigm or whatever. You either change the world or hardly anybody hears about it. There's no middle ground, and then that's just how things work in the world.
Yeah, but
Because if it can spread to 1,000 people, it can spread to 1,000,000 people. What's to stop it?
But you can have a beneficial effect on 100 people if the circumstances are just right, or maybe it's just one other person.
Well, that would be the small size if you personally interacted with all 100 of those people.
Yeah, but it's not worldwide or just a tiny.
I'd still say 100 is tiny.
So we did go a little bit over the time. Let me officially close it by saying, Ron, you didn't get a chance to word in. Would you like to get a word in for everyone's attention?
Well, I like known unknowns from the days of Caspar Weinberger there. There would also be some unknown knowns, right?
Right. Yep. I make that matrix all the time, and the unknown unknowns, the known knowns, and it gets kind of like a Donald Rumsfeld quote.
Yeah, I thought it was Dick Cheney.
I don't know. It was one of the two.
I think it was Dick Cheney.
It was Caspar Weinberger.
Originally, but then I think Rumsfeld made it, but I could be wrong. Like, made a version of it that was...
Well, who knows who said it behind closed doors before he said it.
Carla, please.
I think everyone suffers from despair.
Yes.
We've kind of geared our thoughts tonight towards the highly intelligent, but everybody suffers from it because they can't do the things that they want to do within their own realm, their own family, their own community. They can't get out of poverty. They can't play basketball. They're black and tall, but they can't shoot, you know, and they can't do the things that they want to do. So what do? We overeat, we go shopping, and therefore capitalism works. So we all have it, though.
Capitalism, the engine for capitalism is our despair?
Yes, it is.
I love it.
People go shopping, oh, look what I bought, and they're so thrilled about it, and an hour later, you know, the thrill is
Buyer's
gone.
remorse
because
sets in.
So then you sell it.
They're not
Buyer's
having
remorse
met,
before it comes to the door, right?
they're not having met their simpler needs in their own realm, their sphere of influence. But one way to do it is if there is a tragedy in your neighborhood, get out and go help somebody, go check on your neighbor, and everybody feels better about doing that. I haven't heard of anybody that's gone out to help a neighbor that didn't feel good about it.
Great
Never.
point.
Isn't there another slide?
There is. I just cut it off, but this was the last thing like this. A lot of times, people that are highly intellectual tend to be thinkers instead of feelers, and that can lead to some problems. Like, for example, sometimes when a friend comes to you, sometimes they just want to talk. They don't want a solution. But sometimes people that are highly intelligent, they're problem solvers, and they can't help themselves but be problem solvers, and they can't help but offer the solution.
It takes training.
Yeah, and maybe the person just wants to just talk.
They want to talk to the Eliza chatbot.
It may be, but sometimes highly intelligent people have a hard time. They can't resist trying to solve a problem, or some ties into most of what we're saying. But I didn't really think that slide wasn't too big, so I didn't.
I've gotten to
leave
the
it off.
point where 2 or 3 people in particular, I've told them, don't come and tell me about your problems unless you want to hear about possible solutions.
Yeah, that's my policy.
I rest my case. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I'm not trying to be mean about it. It's not that I don't care about you. It's that I'm going to try to solve the problem.
Oh, so
Every single
Rayfield, the
time.
conclusion of tonight was that intelligence isn't always a good thing. It has its dark
Well, I
sides as well.
understand
That was
there is a
takeaway.
service a lot of people provide in just sitting there with someone and not trying to solve the problem. That is not a service I specialize in.
I think intelligence is a good thing, but a lot more good things are necessary. If that's the only thing, then you can be in really bad shape.
Yeah, I would argue overall intelligence is a good feature to have. You'd have to pick. I would pick having higher intelligence and lower intelligence, right? But at the same time, with that comes some things that are negatives, and that was kind of the takeaway. And being aware of those, we can mitigate them. We can then be, if we're smart people, we could then mitigate some of those, and being more aware of them. That was the idea for tonight, of like being more aware of then where those kind of pitfalls might fall. Because I regard all y'all as intelligent.
And it's interesting to think about what it must be like to be Stephen Hawking.
Well, for not just the intelligent factor, for other reasons as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You know, that certainly he seemed to do well despite being about as impaired as a person could be in all areas other than intelligence.
Does Stephen Hawking, does his fact that he's in that wheelchair and has the computer and all this kind of stuff, does that in a way possibly add to his credibility of being hyper intellectual?
Well, the fact that he invented the talking machine does a lot for that.
I thought that was Ray Kurzweil.
Is that the name of it?
Yeah, I thought somebody else invented it, but beside the point, I mean, does the fact that he's turning that in that state give more credibility to him? Like, people then would think that what he comes up with might be even higher intelligence because of this limited state.
There's a low bandwidth keyboard. That's on.
I would say yes.
Some people could.
I could see it's like,
I would say yes.
but I still don't think someone would choose to be in that situation.
I don't think the theoretical physicists are in the group that'll cut him slack because he's in a wheelchair. I just don't think they think that way.
Well, they're
His
not the
book
group
self-
who made him. Yeah, they're not the group who made him rich. It was his books. Yeah.
And there's many theoretical physicists that disagree with a very large amount of things that he says as well.
That's what theoretical physics are.
Yeah. So we're done. Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's not something I.
Thanks, Ben. Hey, Ben. Sorry for having the formal cutoff, man.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah. Thanks for coming out. Take care.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, I want to say was, Yeah,
There's a
Stephen
lot of
Hawking has
people
a
that are
new book
snot
coming
rags.
out where he says there is no God.
And they enjoy being a snot rag.
Oh, really?
Good for them.
So, yeah.
Heck, you know,
Yes.
soon they have
Who?
a share of it.
Is he physically proving that? Like trying to give a proof for it, or do you know
Who is that
anything
by?
more about it?
I don't know, it hasn't come out yet.
Who's the author?
But it don't matter if you have a proof, it
Did
matters if
someone
you
just
have a
find it
full
like
video.
in a pile or something and just decide maybe he didn't want it to be published? Like, come on.
It's crazy.
Oh, I do.
Why don't he make a video of what he thinks is behind it, and then people might help him with it?
I don't know.
Well, now that I'm so sad, somebody tell me a joke or something so I can go home.
George Gamow was asked why he became a theoretical physicist.
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, he became a research physicist instead of a theoretical physicist. And someone asked him his reasons. And he said because the institute, the research